ahead.
Hi, welcome. I'm Glenn Davis, the school director of Maine State Ballet. We're lucky to have our next door neighbor, Linda MacArthur Miele, who is our artistic director at the Maine State Ballet. She's been doing that for about 45 or so years, which is a long time. And we're excited to have her tonight. We had a little Q&A for her. We got some questions from you guys. And I want to welcome you to our production, our show tonight.
Took me a long time to get here. Lost the way.
So we hope you enjoy hearing from her tonight. We had some questions for you guys, so we'll just get started right away. So how long have you been dancing and what made you start?
So I started dancing when I was 3, and I technically stopped professionally dancing when I was probably 25 or so. Technically, that's, professionally union professional dancing. So I was 3 years old. I started just because, you don't know any better, and that's what every little kid did. And I was the only child, the only girl, the only child. And it was just the thing to do, was to put you in a little ballerina class. And so I went to ballerina class and didn't know anything. Where are you going?
Just don't mind me.
So no particular reason why you start. I just start like everybody else every other little girl starts, is that just your parents think that's going to be so cute and see you in your tutu, and that's
Where did you live and where did you dance at?
We lived outside of Boston, and I danced in a very small single woman owned studio in Boston. Her name was Harriet Hochter. She was not a professional ballet dancer. She was a Ziegfeld Follies dancer. She was a beautiful dancer, obviously ballet trained, but she was never a professional ballet dancer. So I never did learn tap or jazz or anything, but I learned tricks, Ziegfeld Follies. She was known for sort of spinning and balancing and backbending bourrées, and so not a lot of technique back in those days, but I was there from 3 until I was 11. And Boston Ballet at the time was in its very infancy, and it never occurred to me to go to Boston Ballet. Just, I was happy there, and I was learning a lot and doing a lot. And
how did you end up in New York, and how old were you?
So when I was 11, basically I sort of outgrew the little studio, and I was in the dance class with all the kids who were 18 and so, and so it was thought, if you're going to go on and do something, you probably want to move. And at that very time, my parents got divorced, and so my mother and I moved. Her job was able to move her to New York. So we went to New York, but I did not go to New York to become a ballet dancer. I went to New York because I was going to be on Broadway. I thought musical comedy was what I was going to do, because I sang, I did plays, and I could dance ballet. So we went for that, and when we got there, we looked for a dance school, and we wound up at School of American Ballet.
And what was that like when you first got there? What was the
first? I auditioned for Joffrey School when I first got there, and literally name out of the phone book. Oh, Robert we didn't know anything. I had never heard of New York City Ballet. I had never heard of George Balanchine. Had never heard of Jerome Robin. I've never heard of anybody.
Well, you were 11.
I was 11.
I mean.
And so we went to Joffrey School, and you had to audition, and I auditioned, and they actually said to my mother, she's a sort of a Balanchine kind of a dancer. You should take her to School of American Ballet and see if she. I don't know why they wouldn't keep me, but and so we didn't know what that was, and so we went over to SAB, School of American Ballet, and at that time you walked in and you could have an audition, and they took
just
me
off the street.
I just walked in, and
they might have called over maybe. I don't know.
Long time. It's 60 years ago, almost 60 years ago. So what would happen was that they take you in a room, and I went in with Madame Tumkovsky, who up until, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago was still teaching. I think she taught well into her 90s.
Was she like a ballet Russe de Monte Carlo dancer?
She was an old Russian lady with a stick. and she gave me the audition. And I didn't know a lot of technique, but I could turn and I could jump, and whatever she showed me, I could do it, but I didn't know really too much the names of everything. And so we came out, and she said, yes, oh yes, and you're going to be in such and such class, and you're going to have a scholarship, and you're going to have this, and you're going to have that. And we said, okay, you know. And then come to find out that I was actually placed in a very high level, and it didn't set well with a lot of other people, which my mom found out, you know.
Kind of like what happens at our school sometimes.
Kind of like what happens once in a while at a dancing school, and somebody comes in, and then they're, you know, it's not. So, so that was okay, except for then, you know, I got into class, and everybody stood at the bar and said 1, 2, and I didn't know what that was. So it was very terrifying. My first class, I just left after the bar went, and I just cried, and I said to my mother, we gotta get out of here, this is way too scary. It was so scary. And the man's name was Mr. Obukov, and he was just this scary, scary Russian man with a stick, and he came in front of my face, and he went like this. It like snapped his fingers in my face. I just didn't know what was happening. I just came from home at Harriet Hopker's Ziegfeld Follies. I mean, I didn't understand. This was not any fun for me. And so I just cried, and I was like, you know, I'm not going. And he felt so bad. Like, he came over, and he was, oh, small miss, oh, please come back. Oh, no, no, no. And he was so sweet, and he was so nice, and he had no idea that I was really didn't know. Like, I don't know what he thought. I don't know. And then he just became one of my favorite guys, and then I was his favorite too. So, and then it was, you know, after that I just took class. I still never thought about being a ballet dancer. I just thought, well, this is where you're going to take class, you know.
Tell us how you got in the company, like how that played out.
So the first year, I was 11. So then the first year, they ask you, would you like to be in the Nutcracker? And I would have probably been a party child, or you know, or something, or they
Mother Ginger or something.
For well, what they do for Russian is they do this sort of
candy cane
thing where the guy has a hoop, and then there's younger children, and that's probably what I would have done. And I did not want to do it because I missed my family, and so I wanted to go home and, you know, with my grandmother and my cousins and whatnot. So we went home, and people were like, giving up you're not going to do the Nutcracker, you've been invited to do the Nutcracker. I was like, well, you know, I'm going to Broadway, I don't care about the Nutcracker. So we went home, and nothing happened, nobody cared, you know. It wasn't like I went back and they were mad, or they were just, you know. And then the next year, so we finished that year. And then the next
12
year,
years old.
Yeah, so then the next year, I'm in a higher level, because it's called level B, I guess it was, that whole year. And then the next year, 13, that Nutcracker, I apprenticed. And I did Snowflowers.
They don't do that anymore with 13-year-olds, do they?
They don't so much do it with 13-year-olds. Well, you know, and that's really the difference is now, you know, they have to have some kind of rules. And
Child labor.
You know, I had to get like working papers, and I had to get all this stuff because I was not even 16. But that was the thing about Balanchine, is that if you said to him no, he would make it. He wouldn't want to make it happen. So, you know, he would kind of fight for that. So I did that Nutcracker. I did Snowflowers and Spanish. And so it was back in City Center Day, and
not Lincoln Center.
Not Lincoln, before Lincoln Center. And I was so, you know, well, by then Broadway was done, because once you I don't want to call it brainwashing. What I want to call it is you get in this world of School of American Ballet, New York City Ballet, the performers, the stars. I mean, it's a big deal, New York City Ballet. It's a big deal. And you start to see, like, wow, that would be cool. And all these people want to do that. And I probably could. And so you kind of get sucked into that. And you also see, like, how good you are, and like your body just wants to do that and be better, and it feels good to do it. It feels good to work, and it feels good to go to the next level and to do the next thing and to start to do those balancing ballets, and you're hooked. I mean, there's no, all of a sudden Broadway's like.
Tell us about the European tour that when you were very young.
So
that was just after.
Yeah. So then
year.
the next summer, not the 13-year-old summer, the 14-year-old summer, I was going to turn 15 in August. The company went to Europe, was going on a European tour. So I did apprentice 1 year, and that's usually it. And then you either get in or you get out. And they kind of did funny things with me. They kind of let me start learning ballets, but I wasn't technically anything. They just like said, you come, start learn swan legs, start learn stars and stripes. So so when they went on tour to Europe, Mr. Balanchine was bound and determined I was going on that tour, and everybody was like, you cannot take this girl. She's 14 years old. You're going to need a governess. You're going to need a blah blah. And he basically said, I don't care. And so, so at the time, Suzanne Farrell's mother, Mrs. Fickett, was hired to be my guardian. So that did a couple of things. It sort of satisfied the law, and it also got Suzanne's mother to get to go to Europe. So I didn't really ever see her. But so I had to get, and they were all booked, like they were ready to go. Everybody had known about this tour for a couple of years. It was in the making. Everybody had room assignments and roommates, and I had to get a passport. I had to get working papers. I had to get shots. I had to get all this stuff. I had no roommates. I had to, stay by myself. And so anyway, that was my actual contract. Was I got my contract then, and then from then on I was a legitimate.
What were your interactions with Balanchine? Do you have stories of you actually interacting with him personally?
Yeah, well, so the thing about Mr. B is he likes what he likes, and if you don't give him a hard time, he just likes you, he just is a nice man, and he wants to see you do well, and he was very kind to me, partly because age, and partly because people told him don't do that. And so he, like, for example, I was sick in Europe because they tell you don't drink the water, and they mean it. And you're dying, you're just sweating, and and every once in a while I would drink the water. And I got really sick, and he came to the hotel room with the bottle of, I forget what it was called, but it was some kind of
Gatorade.
It wasn't Gatorade. It was, I forget what it is. But he came with some medicine to the hotel just to give it to me and
hand deliver.
Really find out, did I make a mistake? Is she gonna die here? So he was very nice like that. One other time, of course, 14, even at 15, they order you this crate of shoes, and I ordered my shoes a certain size, and then your
Point
feet grow.
shoes, yeah.
What's that?
Point shoes.
Point shoes. Sorry, point shoes. Big crate of point shoes. It takes with you, that crate. I mean, a couple hundred pair of point shoes, and they got too small, and so, and I didn't dare to say anything because who am I, and I got these horrible heel blisters. I mean, like big deep gashes in my heels because shoes were too small, and you just, and I didn't dare to say anything. And the girls were like, you got to tell somebody. And I'm like, I don't have to tell anybody. It's 100 pairs of shoes. And so somebody told Mr. Balanchine. And he said, dear, get them different shoes. I'm like, but there's so many. And what you paid for them? And he's like, send the shoes to the school. So he sent all the shoes to the school, and the kids in the school wore them, and I got bigger shoes. So that's a couple of just small incidents where Mr. Balanchine was very kind to me, I gotta say.
So going back, a couple questions here
Yeah.
from the audience that deal with what you've been dealing with. So when you were coming up in the company, who were the ballet inspirations of you at New York City Ballet? Who were the people you looked up to, and or elsewhere?
Yeah. So I'm gonna say two people. One person I think that helped me probably get really better and solid in my actual technique was Stanley Williams. So when Stanley Williams came from the Royal Danish Ballet to the School of American Ballet, Balanchine brought him to teach at the school. And at that time, many Russian teachers, and Muriel Stewart, who was from Royal England, what's the Royal Ballet in England, her background. And there weren't the generation of people that were really Balanchine like they are now, like Kay Mazo and my generation of people who teach there now. So a lot of Russian people, which was great technique and great learning. But when Stanley came, somehow he like revolutionized all of the dancers in the company. Like everybody in the company would want to go to the school and take Stanley Williams' class. And he was very good to me. He liked me a lot. He helped me a lot. And I think that his whole manner. First of all, he was Danish, and I'm Danish, so that kind of quirky Danish sense of humor, very quiet, very soft-spoken, but kind of wry and funny. But he just would explain things in a way that dancers could feel it in their bodies better. So that was really helpful to me to learn that. And then when the company members would come to the school and take class, when you look up to them, some of them were kind of, wouldn't speak to the girl, wouldn't talk to the SAB kids or whatever. But Patricia McBride was just the most beautiful ballerina lady. She was probably literally like 7 years older than me, is all. She was probably 20, But to me, and the thing was, she always had these outfits, and so she always had a matching leotard and a matching skirt. So it might be pale blue and a pale blue skirt, and this giant bow, pale blue bow, would be in her bun, and she always looked like the Coppelia doll. Like she just had this little porcelain doll face, and then the next day it might be like pale yellow. So I just had all her outfits. I went out, learned how to get dye, and I got all the white leotards and the white skirts, and I dyed them all, and they all matched. And I had all the colors, and I had the bow, and I just was Patty McBride for a couple of years, and so I kind of looked up to them as far as, one real teacher, and one, I want to be her. She's so pretty. But when you get actually into the company and you work with everybody, you just get a real appreciation for everybody's talent, like everybody's dedication, everybody's talent. You're in class with Allegra Kent and Melissa Hayden and Jacques D'Amboise and Addie Villela, and you just learn from them. You just see how hard they work, and you just pick things. You can just see, that one does that like so well, and that one, I see how she does that. I could probably do a little bit. So you kind of look up to everybody almost in a way, but I just always remember I was going to be Patty McBride when I grew up.
What was a favorite ballet or two that you enjoyed dancing and performing?
Yeah. So I looked at that question, and sort of that one question I think that Sarah Esty said almost had like two parts. So I think
one that gives you the most cherished on-stage memory.
Yeah, so the difference between those, I think probably one of my favorite ballets to actually dance is Concerto Barocco. Because just, the musicality of that, and it never stops. Like you never go off stage, and you're always in tune with the orchestra. You're always doing something, and it's just so brilliantly done. So I really enjoyed dancing that ballet. The other side of that is what gives you a sense of like, this is so cool. Every time the first strings start in Serenade, it's magical. You just hear those first notes of Serenade, and the curtains closed that whole first beginning, and you hear the whole melody go all the way through, and then you hear that last boom, and you say like that, and the curtain opens, it's silence, and you're like, this is magical. Because you've seen, you've watched it probably like so many times when you're growing up. But there's something about the simplicity of that opening of that ballet and how there's just no movement, there's hardly anything, but there's all these beautiful girls who have worked so many years to stand there, and you can hear Mr. B saying, shade your face from the light. Oh man, it's just beautiful. So those are different, that's like I love that feeling. And then you love Concerto Barocco, and then you love everything else. It's really hard. Things that are really hard are fun to do.
So you stopped at your mid-20s. What was the situation that caused you to stop, and what did you do next?
So what winds up happening is, then there was Lincoln Center. And Lincoln Center,
you were there for the opening of Lincoln Center.
Yeah.
Which is now the David H. Koch Theater.
David Koch Theater, yeah. And so what happens with Lincoln Center, it was a completely self-contained. There was a cafeteria. You had your dressing room. There were no windows in the building, in the backstage of the building. There were windows, along the front and where the audience comes in. But otherwise than that, there's no windows. And I started to feel a little bit like
claustrophobic almost.
A little bit out of touch with what's happening in the world. So now you have to understand, you go in there when you're 11 years old, now you're 20, you start to wonder, are there people who can't dance? Like, I remember thinking to myself, there's probably people that don't dance, and they still live lives. They're still like around. And so it started to be kind of a real thing. And the other thing was, I was getting a little bit of pressure. I was getting high enough up to really start to feel like this is going to be the rest of my life, or I probably got to take a break and see if there's something else going on in the world. And so it started out, I thought it would be a leave of absence, kind of, because you're allowed to do that. And so I thought maybe that would, and I just remember going outside and just being like, whew, this is probably better. Like, it just felt like the right thing to do at the time. And I stopped dancing, didn't just stop doing anything for a little bit of time, not for very long, a couple months. I went to work in my mother's office, doing, filing. And I can literally remember, like, the people around me were nice people, and I thought, these are nice people, and they can't dance. I mean, it was like a world. It was like you're stuck in this world. You go in that world when you're 11 and you don't come out of the theater. I mean, you literally don't come out of the theater. You go to the theater at 8:30, 8:45 in the morning, 9:30 class, rehearse all day, cafeteria, take a little quick nap in the theater, sew your shoes, start the makeup, do the performance. It's 11:30 at night. You go in. It's in the winter. It's dark when you go in. It's dark when you come out. You don't know anything else. There's nothing else. That's all there is. And so it was really different to be on the outside world and see that people couldn't dance. It was really funny to me. Like, how is she happy? She can't dance. It was really weird. But anyway, then I got into sort of a different kind of dance after.
So I don't want to spend too much time on the Broadway time, even though that's really awesome.
Yeah.
And you did some national tours, and you met Jonathan, your husband, and you did some national tours and shows together. How did you end up wanting to come back to Maine, and then how did Maine State Ballet kind of start up?
Yeah. So we, I did go on a dare to a Broadway audition, and New York City Ballet is on my resume. So I got in that show, and I worked for 2 years in that show, and then met Mr. Miele, and he was working at a different show. At that time on Broadway, you had to go. The tours would go out first. You'd go out for about a year on tour to make enough money so that if you came back to Broadway and you got a bad review, you already had your money. And so that was how it was working. It was gone. It was suitcases,
For a year,
trunks,
and then
a year. Two nights here, 3 nights here, bus, playing, So we kind of went, we were thinking, well, we might get married and we might want to have a family. This is probably not the place we want to be to do that. And it happened that at that time we were thinking, well, what would we do in Maine? Like, what could we do if we came back to, Mr. Miele's from Maine, from Wyndham. And at that time, the lady that had taken over Maine State Ballet, first it was called Dorothy Mason School, and then it was called Thomas School. Polly Thomas was running the dancing school. She also had Bangor. Her big school was in Bangor, so she was Mr. Miele's teacher. So she said, well, why don't you guys take over the Portland school? And I just can do Bangor, and you can. I mean, I think she sold it to us for like some chewing gum. And she said, you can just take over that one, and that would be great, and I can just stay up here in Bangor. And of course we said, oh yes, that would be so easy. It would just be so much fun. So we came back to Maine and lived in Wyndham and took over this, well-established 100-year-old school, and that's where it started. And we went back.
So you started with a school.
We started with a school.
And then how did the Maine State Ballet grow out of that?
Let me interject for one moment.
Yeah.
People are loving this, saying they like this, and hi,
love you
and
all.
lots of waves and hearts.
Love you all.
Okay,
Is
continue.
Dave still here?
I don't know. I don't know how to tell
How
that.
did Maine State Ballet?
So Maine State Ballet. So there was Polly Thomas had started a Maine State Ballet. She had Maine State Ballet
In the 70s or something, or 60s?
Yeah,
or
probably in the 70s or late 60s.
Yeah.
Because Mr. Miele danced in it, and Mrs. Lowe danced in it, and so then she went to Bangor, and it didn't do well. It wasn't real successful, I mean, so there was no performing group to this school that we took over, just the Thomas School. So we said, well, we should have a Christmas party, and we'll do some little things from Nutcracker. So we did this little Christmas party at the dancing school, and it was cute. We did some stuff. And then, like everything that you touch, the next year it's like, oh, we should do the whole Nutcracker. And the next year we should do it in a theater. And then we should do it at Merrill Auditorium.
The
and
orchestra.
Then we should get an orchestra. So we didn't know that the Maine State Ballet name would be available. So we called it American Ballet East in the beginning, I think.
And how long? You were like for 10 years the American Ballet East or
I think
something?
probably
70s
10,
and 80s?
yeah,
and,
probably.
Yeah.
For a while. And then we thought, boy, it would be great if Maine State Ballet name was available, And so then when we checked it out, it was available because it had I don't understand about the.
So when I came in 1991, my first year, we were Maine State Ballet, but there were still American Ballet. There were American Ballet East shirts lying around and stuff, so people still had things like that.
Yeah.
But that had recently been changed in the last.
Yeah, I think it was
little bit.
1985 that
Okay.
it became Maine State Ballet again, and and then it's just kind of.
That long ago?
I think so.
Maybe.
So-
We'd
I
have to
think
check.
it was, but
What did
Yeah,
you
who
learn
knows?
from Balanchine about running your company in school? Like what do you bring from that from
Yeah.
him?
So what I learned from Balanchine is the school is the important part. You have to have a school. You have to have a well-run school. You have to have a school that feeds in little children and trains them up the way they should go. And then they become a style, and they become a cohesive performing unit. And that's what you want to see. You want this company, your company wants to be cohesive and have a look to it. And you can't do that by just having a company. You can't just hire 12 different dancers from all over the country and not train them in any kind of style. I'll just put them on stage. You can, but it's not sustainable, and it's not really aesthetically what you want. So what I learned from
And they're
Balanchine,
not your dancers.
and they're
either.
not your dancers. Yeah, what
They're
I
not
learned
people,
from what I learned from Balanchine is that it's the school, and become involved in the school and know the kids and see their potential. Not only do you need that for sustainability, that's the joy of it. That's the joy of it, is to see, to look at all the 5-year-olds and go, "Ooh, look at her, she's on the music," and wait and see where does she go, you know, and what's the next level up, and what's the next level up, and you know, that's the joy of it. And the other thing I learned from Balanchine is utilize the strengths of your dancers. Don't it's not
pigeonhole them.
Yeah.
And make them do exactly your step you want them to
and
do.
it's not about you, it's about them. It's about what are we going to present that's going to make them look good, and therefore the audience is going to love it because that person's going to, you know.
So you change. You'll do a role sometimes. You'll do a ballet, and you'll have a ballerina do a certain part, and the next ballerina come along and can't do that. Doesn't have the strength. That doesn't have the arabesque of that previous one, and you might take that out and change it around, right?
Absolutely.
So it's a living. You always say a living choreographer.
And I watched Balanchine do that time and time again.
So it didn't become just the template, and that's the only
No.
way you can do it. It's constantly evolving and changing depending on the dancers you have.
Yep. And he would know this one has a little more this and this one has a little more that. And then when he would choreograph, his inspiration came music, but it came from the dancer. So if he get a dancer in a room, if a dancer could do something, you know, then that's part of the choreography. Like that was part of his genius, is that he would take the dancer's body and work with it like a canvas. And so that variation, he could do a variation, the same piece of music, 12 different times, 12 different dancers, they'd all be different. It'd all be a different variation. And he could do it in 10 minutes because he knew his dancers so well that he would just know what they could do. So that's another thing that I learned from him. I watched him do it.
You know what's funny to me sometimes? You'll be casting a ballet, and the dancers think they know what the ballet is about and what the roles are.
Yeah.
And they don't know that you're in a room going, well, I'm going to take this out because I want to make this new role and take this other piece out. They're all expecting something to happen, and they're like, what's this new role? And they don't know that that you can change things, and we can just change things around and for the good of the company.
Yeah, and for the good of the dancers, you gotta keep your people involved and happy and just above what they're capable of, so that they have to reach, you know. So they have to reach for the next thing. Yeah.
So you've done, we can say now, dozens of ballets. Not several, not tens, but like dozens of ballets here. Do you have some favorites that you've choreographed? Do you have some ones that you don't like? Do you have, I mean, what do you think about your ballet? What's some of your, looking back on your work?
Yeah. So there's a couple, I think the first thing I was really happy with was Britain, which is just a little Benjamin Britten piece. I
Maybe
think
about 25 minutes long.
Yeah, I think I was happy with that because it made me see that I could move people, you know, pattern and things, because you don't know, you just don't know, you don't know if you know. I don't know if you know what you're doing, really. You just have music and you just have dancers and you just move them. And it was also, I had 9 dancers, and so that was an odd number of people. So to be able to work that and make it work in the kind of the nice patterns that it came out in, I was happy with that, and I still enjoy watching.
And that's
it.
developed and changed through the years. You've
I was
added
gonna
some
say,
male variations. You added me with a male variation. You added pas de trois and pas de deux, and
it's
as you've
it's
gone
a
along.
work in progress.
I was gonna say you had 9.5 dancers because I
did.
was too small
That's
to.
true.
I was the same age as the others, but
Yeah, I had 9 dancers that were normal sized,
So you
and then Janet.
usually talk about too, like when Gail came, because you came from the tradition of neoclassical Balanchine ballet, and most of the stuff he did, more of the stuff he did, didn't have a story.
Correct.
But how did you get into feeling confident about doing story ballets with Gail coming along in the early 90s?
I don't know. She's just so mean. She just made me. Yeah, I was not confident at all in a story ballet. I was like, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to make people act. I don't know how to fill space with story. I know how to fill space with steps. I know how to fill music with steps and patterns, but to fill music with
Telling a story.
I don't know about that. And you really kind of think it's more like directing than choreographing. But Gail and Fred are very helpful to me. Were, you know, back when the first was the first one we
Can, I
did?
think, was the first
Was
thing,
Can
right?
the first
And
one?
then
And then
Cinderella.
So Can was the first
Can
story
was the first
ballet.
one. Can wasn't too bad because it was a very loose story. You know, it was
No,
more
Alice. We did Alice before Cinderella. Cinderella was the first big one.
big one.
We did.
So
Well,
Can
Alice we did as a
As a
little
little one.
storybook ballet.
Yeah.
It wasn't really the story. It was
Right.
little vignettes
Yeah.
of choreography.
So the first one was Can in the early 90s.
The first one was Can.
1991.
Yeah.
And there was some things that you could look at, you know, like sometimes there's something you can see online, and Gail has a good eye for, she has a good sense of libretto. Like she has a good sense of how the book can translate. And so we talk about that, like what kind of scenes, what does it need to be, and then if there's music, it's not that bad. It wasn't that bad, and I felt okay about Can. It was kind of fun. Alice in Wonderland started really as just a little lecture demonstration thing for kids, where we just had we actually made a little storybook, which was maybe
8 feet tall.
8 feet tall, and 16. And it was just little.
It wasn't 16. It was like 10 feet wide.
10 feet
It
wide.
was really tiny.
You were
It was
there, right?
tiny.
Yeah.
It was tiny. So and we had
People would
we had
turn the
Alice,
page to change,
and
yeah.
then we would have the caterpillar, and we'd have the rabbit, and, But that wasn't really like a whole story ballet. So the big story ballet we did was Cinderella, and that was hard.
And
that
Gail
was very
helped
hard
you
to me.
get to sort of push you in that direction and
Yes.
help you know that you could do
Yes.
that. And having done that, then you could.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, what she would say is, "Oh, you could do that." No, you don't need
That sounds like Gail.
Just do that. And then what she does is she shows me the pictures of the costumes, and then you have to do it because the costumes are so pretty. But there also is music for that. I mean, there's a score for Cinderella. So I can picture it. I can picture it when I'm listening to the score. I can picture it. Okay, I can see that that's the stepsisters. I can see that that's the ball. I can see that that's the jester. So when there's a score, it's not too bad. It's when you try to make a story ballet without music written for it.
That's when you have to be Disney
That's
and create your own music.
That's when you know that you're okay. Like you know how to do it now. Like I know how to do it now. I could never do that without. That was hard. Alice in Wonderland, the whole ballet, that was hard.
So that was the first one you put
that
together.
was hard.
The second version. It was like the
The big
2.0.
version, yes. Alice 2. Yeah. So I liked Britain. My other thing I was going to say that I really is one of my favorite things is the angel scene from
Hansel and
Hansel and Gretel. That's one of my favorite things to watch. It's one of my favorite things. It's very simple, but it's very well done. It's beautifully done. So yeah, those are a couple of things that come to my mind when I think of things. Mm-hmm.
There's an interesting question here. I don't really quite understand it, but I'm going to read some of it. But
Is it Michael Hamilton's question?
That's what I understand.
Let me.
It's talking.
yeah.
It's
Before
talking
we
about,
get into all that,
yeah.
Dave says he's still here.
Hi, Dave.
Sarah says she loves Whale, your favorite.
Oh, my Sarah.
Loving hearing all these stories.
Tell us the
Amazing.
Sarah Whale story right now.
Oh, my Sarah. I would have probably not. We would have not done Cinderella. It's one of those things as well. Is that you look around, you look what you have at your disposal, and what I had was the beautiful Sarah Whale and the Disney Prince Fred Bernier. That's what we had.
That's the first thing I saw when I walked in the building. Is
Yeah.
those two practicing, and I wanted to do that.
It's to die for. They were to die for. So that made it. You can do. If you have Sarah Whale and Fred Bernier, you can do Cinderella. Like you just put them out there and put the music on, and they just know how to do it. So that that is what you think. You have to think who do we have, and what can be done with them, because you can't say, well, I'm just going to have a beautiful story of Cinderella and you don't have anybody who can dance it. So yeah, my Sarah.
So have you seen people go? Like, have you seen like roles that have been played? Like we've done Cinderella 5 or 6 times. We've done Sleeping Beauty 5 or 6 times. Swan Lake 2 or 3 times. You see people doing roles. You see people repeating roles, and you see new people coming into roles. Like, can you comment on that at all? Like, what your thoughts are?
So I think what I like about how we do things is that I can make subtle changes for people. What normally happens, and this happens at New York City Ballet too, I believe, is what normally happens is the level of technique ratchets up
Through time.
Through time, because the level of technique just gets better. So there are some things that you could maybe throw a little extra this in or a little extra that in, so that people who are looking for that go, ooh, she just did that triple or whatever it is. And then you have different personalities that will bring completely different, even sometimes that I go, oh, I like that she did that. I like the way she's doing that. No, it's not Sarah Whale. But look at who it is, Janet Davis. Look at what she brings to it. Oh, she's a little sad girl. So you like what the next person does and what they bring to it, and so it makes it. It's never the same. It's never, and you don't want somebody trying to be Sarah Whale. You want that person to be who they are, because if you try to be the other person, you come in and try to be Fred, it ain't happening.
You called me the People's Prince, and you called Fred was like the Cinderella.
Fred is the Disney prince.
Yeah, and I was more the peasant
Glenn
prince.
was the peasant prince. Glenn was the Basilio prince. So, but everybody loves him. So it's not like it's just different. It's just people are gonna like. They're gonna like that, and when we're lucky enough now to sometimes have 2 and 3. Like Sugar Plums are 2 and 3. We have 3 bells in Beauty and the Beast. People are going to come and they're going to like, oh, I love what she did with that one. And say, oh, I didn't realize that part when I saw her do it. Or I saw her do that was, So people are going to, they just.
Well, you said that Balanchine used to not even say who was going to be in the cast because he wanted people to come see the ballet.
Yeah.
But then people wanted to see Eddie Villala do it, or people wanted to see this other person.
People have their favorites.
They have their favorites, and they like to do that. But now they publicize everything a lot of times. But
also people have lots of favorites.
Yeah.
So they might come twice because they want to see both people. But yeah, things change throughout time, and people bring what they bring to it. And
so when you walk into a ballet class, what type of dancer inspires you the most to work with them? Like what's your ideal dancer? Like what kind of?
So,
just for all those people who want to come to her class.
Well, to me, the most important thing is music. So if you can execute steps on the music with the energy and precision, I don't so much care if the 5th position is exactly right. You know what I'm saying? It's nice to have nice développé and nice this and nice that, but
you're saying that trumps body structure.
Absolutely, musicality trumps everything, because musicality comes from here. So if you're feeling music and you can put your body into the music, that's what the audience feels. And some of the audience knows about technique and some don't. But what everybody knows is, I heard something in that music I never heard before. And that's because that dancer showed them the music in a certain way that they never heard before. And so that's really important, to feel music, to execute, musically. Obviously got to have some technique. You can't, but so it's music, it's kind of passion, like I want to do it. And then third is probably technical ability. It's nice to see as well.
And you always say hard work trumps.
Yeah, passion.
I mean,
/hard work.
Obviously, you have to have some sort of foot and some sort of leg.
You have to be able to execute.
Right, but you always say hard work is always trumps everything, because you've seen people come up who've just worked so hard.
Well, I saw people in New York City Ballet with lesser technique than they have now, and you still want to watch that person. You know, there's something about them that you want to watch them. You want to, you know, there's something they have that's magical that you want to see. And sometimes a perfectly executed whatever can be very boring. So, you know, that's what I'm.
Are there any questions that have come in? I have two more, but I wanted to see if anyone else had any.
Callie says that flower scene in Alice is her personal favorite. I think it was in Alice, and then I think people are agreeing that the angel scene is their favorite.
One of the favorites.
One of the faves.
And just highs and hearts and loving it.
Okay, one of these questions: how are you still so turned out?
Oh, I think both my hips are broken.
Wait, did we get to the one that we didn't understand yet?
Yeah, I asked about that.
Sorry, I must have told
yeah.
I think that's what Michael's asking. Is like when another person takes over the role, right? That's kind of what his question was.
Is it difficult having generations of dancers come through in dance roles?
Yeah.
And like, what you commented on? I think. Yeah.
No, I don't. I was always very turned out. And I mean, I think you get once you have that. I don't think it goes back. You know, I think it's just structurally lucky. That's all. I mean, you know. But I worked at it because, you know, back in my little school in Ziegfeld Follies, I never learned turnout. So you have to learn that, and you have to work it, and then it's, you know, it's still there.
What's the most important thing for a dancer to know technically at the bar?
So I think plie and tendu is the basis for everything. So if you've got a good juicy plie and you can push out of it, you know, get down, push up, strength, you know, that kind of strength in the calves and the feet and the thighs, and then figuring out where tendu is in relationship to your standing leg, because everything's that. So then dégagé is the same thing, and then fondu's the same thing, and then grand battement's the same thing, développé's the same thing. It's all the same thing. You just got to figure out it on the floor, tendu, where your body is, and I learned that from Stanley Williams, where your standing leg is, where that working leg is, so it's not leaning on the ground, it's not hip up, it's not, you know, so it starts with tendu. And once you kind of figure where that is, then you just take it to the next level, and then your passe is part of it, standing leg. So then the pirouette is part of that. It's plie and tendu.
What's your most, what am I trying to say? I just had it. Not your proudest thing, but the thing you feel best about that you've done over the last 45 years. Like what's here at Maine State Ballet? What's not your legacy? But what are you most what's not proud of, but satisfied with, or happy with that
I think what I'm most happy with is that we have a group of people that are very diverse. The dancers, the teachers, the staff, you know, they're very diverse. They're creative. They're, you know, passionate about this or that. They have quirks. They're quirky. Madame. I mean, it's an art form. They're creative people, so they're all just different from each other. And I think one of the things I'm the most proud of is that we are all still there. Like, we all get along. We all work together.
After decades.
Decades. I mean, people work here for decades, and we all get along. And I think it comes from the top, you know. Like, so, in other words, I don't like that. If you're not a team player, that's the only thing I get mad about is if you're not a team player, or if you're not.
And that doesn't mean you can't speak up and ask questions and things, but it's like.
No, because everybody does. All these creative people.
But to know what the most important thing is, the ballet company, and what we're trying to accomplish.
We're trying to work together, and we're trying to work for the good of the team. And
Well, and I like that we all, because this is Janet Davis behind the camera, that we all are different, but we have the same vision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what keeps us together.
And it's
the same vision.
And it's like you were just saying, it's the students, it's the productions, it's the people.
Dave.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's
Guys.
the people, and that's what, when people come back, we all love that we dance, and
and I think it's great that we've been able to accomplish what we've been able to accomplish without a lot of compromise in our standards, in our, we don't have to do things that we don't feel are right. We don't feel like we have to put out shows or put on, I don't know.
We don't have to do extra events that don't go along with our vision.
We don't have to do things that don't go with our mission. And we know what our mission is, and it's family friendly entertainment, uplifting the community through dance. So we're all kind of about that. So I mean, I think that's really a good thing, and hopefully that goes on. And it's nice to have a body of work to get the next gen started on. So in other words, if I'm gone in however long, nobody has to start from scratch, which is what's great about Mr. Balanchine, is that he had this enormous amount of works, ballets, and little companies would come and they say, Boston Ballet and Pennsylvania Ballet and San Francisco Ballet and Miami City Ballet, and they would start a company, and he would give them stuff. He'd say, have these ballets, So like we have its body of work, so that Maine State Ballet, if there's a drought for 4 or 5 years where there's not money to do enough something new, or there's not people to do something new, you're still going to be able to do things, because that repertoire is going to be there for us to fall back on. And luckily we got video of it and stuff, so you can recreate some of that. You don't have to start from scratch, so that's helpful, I think.
So where do we go from here? What's next for you? And that's the last question.
Well, what's next is to get out of the house. I'm excited about Beauty and the Beast. I want to see it. I like it. I'm happy with it. And it's one of those big story ballets with no score. And I think we worked...
That you had to cobble together the story.
We worked really hard on it, and it got to be a beautiful, beautiful thing. And we want people to see it. So that's what's next is Beauty and the Beast. And then... I'm not again another ballet or two. I mean, I like.
If your knee holds up.
Either knee holds up. And I think upping the ante for our students. I mean, Mr. Davis and I have been working on curriculum and just becoming a more and more and more cohesive unit of making it so that it's almost foolproof. So that we just have this template of ways of doing things that are just easy for people to understand and get on the team really fast and understand where we're going. So yeah, I mean, I see us
moving forward.
Good. Well, I think Katie says it best. We are family.
Katie Farwell. Katie Farwell.
We are a Maine State Ballet family. We are.
That's what it feels like.
DeSantis. See.
Yep.
Thanks, Katie.
Well, thanks for joining us tonight from the Davis studio at Maine State Ballet. Interviewing
That may be what's next. It may just be like a whole like commercial production studio that's happening next.
Well, thank you to Linda MacArthur Miele, our artistic director, and for Janet Davis for holding the camera. And we appreciate you joining in with us tonight and to learn a little bit more about her and Maine State Ballet. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
This was so wonderful. Loved listening. That's from Ava. Oh. Yes. All right. Bye.
Miss you.
Are you off?